Hello and welcome to Solar Alberta's 2021 seminar series. Today's webinar is called Mind the Gap, Best Practices to Close the Gender Gap in the Renewable Sector. My name is Mackenzie Felders and I am the Public Awareness and Communications Assistant at Solar Alberta. I would like to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm hosting you today from Fort McMurray, which is located on Treaty 8 territory and the homelands of the Métis. Treaty 8 territory is the traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree and Dene, nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. We were delighted to have so many people register for this event. Please note that we will be recording this webinar for future distribution so that those who missed out on registering can still participate. Today, we will be hearing from 3 informative speakers about how to close the gender gap in the renewable sector. Following the presentations, there will be a Q&A period in which you can all participate. Throughout the event and after, you are encouraged to give us a shout out on social media using #SolarAlberta. We will be using Zoom Q&A for questions rather than the chat box, so please enter your questions in the Q&A section. You should be able to click on that section in your Zoom toolbar. You can upvote good questions that others have asked or post some of your own. The questions that are voted up will show up at the top of the list, and we will be pulling primarily from those for the moderated Q&A, as we likely won't have time for all questions. And now for a little about Solar Alberta. Did you know that this is Solar Alberta's 30th year of operation? Solar Alberta is a not-for-profit society that is dedicated to public education about renewable energy and energy efficiency. We also serve as a hub for the solar industry in Alberta. Our membership is made up of individuals and businesses. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory through our website, which is the most popular directory for solar energy and green building services in Alberta. In this way, we act as a bit of a bridge for installers and suppliers to connect with their customers and clients. We have 338 total members made up of 159 business members and 179 individual members. We also run a number of educational programs, such as our annual solar show and many networking and outreach events to special populations. In 2021, our solar show reached people from over 60 different municipalities and counties. This is the last seminar of our 2021 Solar Series webinars aimed at the general public on Thursdays over the lunch hour, but we will have many more to come in 2022. You can also find archived videos of our previous webinars on our website. We are working with our partner, Empower Me, on a series offering Rooftop Solar 101 educational seminars to various diaspora communities in Alberta and across Canada. The first of this series is planned for October 13th in Mandarin and is sponsored by the Emerald Foundation. This fall, we will be running a number of online courses for solar industry professionals or those transitioning into the sector. Our courses are online Tuesday and Thursday evenings on 3 to 5 nights over 2 to 3 weeks. Please see the registration links in the chat box for these upcoming events or find them at solaralberta.ca. In honor of our 30th anniversary, we will be hosting a reunion event on November 2nd at 7 p.m. to celebrate 30 years of education about renewable energy, energy efficiency, and climate change. We will mingle, learn about the evolution of Solar Alberta, and hear from Solar Alberta historians. We have also confirmed the dates for our 2022 annual solar show. We will be offering online seminars from February 7th to 11th and in-person networking events in both Edmonton and Calgary on Friday, February 11th. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that a few months ago, Solar Alberta won a 2021 Emerald Award in the Community Group or Nonprofit category. For 30 years, the Alberta Emerald Foundation has celebrated the outstanding environmental achievements of many organizations and individuals across Alberta. We are proud and thankful to have been recognized in this manner for the second time in our own 30-year history. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Butterwick for sponsoring today's seminar. We are happy to have them as a sponsor. I would also like to thank our partner, Women in Renewable Energy, for participating in today's webinar. We believe their leadership in helping close the gender gap in the renewable industry will add value to today's conversation. We are always interested in developing more partnerships for our events. If you or your company want to work with us to educate the public about the benefits of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and climate change, please don't hesitate to reach out. I now have the pleasure of introducing our MC for the seminar. Joanna Osaway is the president and CEO of WIRE, Women in Renewable Energy. Joanna has attended Western University studying languages, graduating with an honors Bachelor of Arts. Joanna works at ABB in the position of Business Development Manager, End Users, and EPCs. Joanna has used her language skills on a focused 15-year management career at leading renewable and energy sector companies in Canada and the United States. By carrying complex projects through many stages, she has seen firsthand the vital role renewable energy and emerging technology serve in moving the Canadian, American, and global energy mix forward. Recently, Joanna has been appointed to the Federal Sustainable Development Advisory Council led by Minister Jonathan Wilkinson of Environment and Climate Change. She looks forward to engaging and contributing to the Council's success. The Council is made up of the Canadian public that represent the views of different provinces and territories, Indigenous peoples, as well as environmental, non-governmental organizations, and business and labor organizations. I will now pass the mic over to Joanna, who will provide a brief overview of WIRE and introduce today's panelists.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with all of you. Thanks for having me. Thank you to our partners, Solar Alberta. Thanks to Butterwick, of course, as our sponsor, and the fantastic panelists that we have, and all the audience and stakeholders that are joining us today. Very brief comment in regards to WIRE. It stands for Women in Renewable Energy. We are a national Canadian non-for-profit organization from East Coast to the West Coast. We're also an international organization and are currently in 5 different MENA regions and are launching WIRE Italy and WIRE Africa very soon. Some of our programs include awards. Of course, we do mini conferences, one that is upcoming for hydrogen. We provide field trips. We do speed mentoring, speed interviewing. We do blogs on champions. We provide webinars or networking opportunities. We do workshops. And of course, we have WIRE student chapters as well. As mentioned, although we are an international organization, I like to use the word global, so be global, but act local. Programs that may be applicable here on the Canadian market may not be applicable in different jurisdictions. Therefore, we work very, very closely with the WIRE chapter leads in the respective countries that we are currently in. So I just wanted to say again, a big thank you to all of you. I do want to just make an announcement that we will be running polls throughout the session. So please, answer those polls because we certainly want and value your communication and your feedback. So without further ado, again, I'm just so thrilled to be amongst such an amazing group of powerful women. Ms. Yasmin Abraham, the Vice President at Empower Me. We also have Roberta Giroux, the Apprenticeship Coordinator at Trade with Success, and Professor Christina Hoytska, who's the Associate Professor of Geography and Civil Engineering at the University of Victoria. So about the webinar, before we get started, it's really to mind the gap and the best practices to close the gender gap in the renewable sector. While more gender diverse than the energy sector as a whole, the renewable energy workforce is estimated to be comprised of only 32% of women. This rate is lower than in other areas of the economy that require similar levels of training and experience. There are also concerns that women are routinely promoted less and paid less across all sectors of the economy. These factors, when combined, are commonly referred to as the gender gap. Given that the renewable energy sector is growing at an incredible pace and promises to provide an increasing number of jobs in the near future, the renewable energy sector has a significant role to play in addressing the gender gap that exists in our society. As a whole, we need to work hard to engage and retain more women to fill the growing demand for skilled renewable energy workers. Women's leadership and contributions are essential to ensure that the journey systems for the future address the needs of modern societies and leave no one behind. Join us to explore the issue of the gender gap in the renewable energy industry and learn what you and your employer can do to help close it. So again, without further ado, I'm going to ask the panelists to provide a very quick introduction to themselves. And again, a big thank you to our partner, Solar Alberta, and to our sponsor, Betterwick. So I will ask the panelists to turn on their cameras at this time. Perfect. Welcome. It's very good to see all of you. And just looking at to my right, Professor Christina Huerta, if you can start with an introduction, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here today. I am an associate professor at the University of Victoria, and I am cross-appointed between civil engineering and geography. And my research is about renewable energy transitions, how communities are participating in that and gaining local economic development benefits. I'm also interested in the diffusion of low carbon innovations, and again, how the demand side and communities adopt those and participate in a renewable energy transition. I'm also the co-founder and former chair of Women and Inclusivity in Sustainable Energy Research, which is a global research network of women and non-binary people doing sustainable energy research.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and welcome, Professor Huerta. Miss Yasmin Abraham from Empower Me.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's nice to be here, and thanks for the invitation. My name is Yasmin Abraham. I'm co-founder of the Cambo Energy Group and of Empower Me, as we're known in some circles. I'm calling you, or I'm talking to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. Cambo Energy Group is a social enterprise. We design, deliver, and provide energy, climate, and housing solutions and programs for communities that have been historically under-prioritized. So we work directly with Indigenous communities, newcomers, immigrants, and lower-income Canadians to ensure their inclusion in the just transition in climate. Certainly this topic and the gender gap is very close to my heart and something I'm very passionate about. So thank you for the invitation, and it's nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you here as well. Over to you, Roberta.
Thank you for having me. My name's Roberta Drew, and I'm the Apprenticeship Retention Coordinator for Trade Winds to Success. So I do the employer relations there as well. So I establish relationships with industry to create employment opportunities for our clients. So Trade Winds to Success is a pre-apprenticeship training program for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Along with that, I also do the career skills development with all the clients. I am a journeyman electrician by trade, so I also do the electrical instruction for our tiny home project.
Thank you so much, and welcome to all of you. So again, thanks again for all of you being here, and I'm going to start in regards to getting some questions asked to the panel. So although the renewables sector has successfully recruited more women to date than the energy sector as a whole, we know that we are still a far cry from gender parity in the sector. What do you see as the primary factors inhibiting women from participating equally in the renewable sector? Perhaps we can start off with you, Roberta.
Okay, just put it on me, hey? Well, I've been in the industry for the last 15 years. I've done commercial, industrial, residential, and solar. So I've done, I've been a part of many projects in the solar industry. As a woman in the trades, and an Indigenous woman in the trades, I've faced that a few times. So I have a lot of experience and firsthand knowledge with this topic, so it's very near and dear to me as well. So yeah. What was the question?
Sure. So the question was really in regards to what do we do and to bring more, what do you see the primary inhibiting factors for women participating equally in the renewable sector? So I think, sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I think first of all, I think for myself, getting into what they say, they call it a man's world, just navigating through that. But I think the more, women in the energy sector, it makes it easier for women to navigate through it. So having those peer mentors, I know I've been on many sites, and it's not often that you see a woman in the trades. So when it made it harder for me to navigate through different projects that I was on, but when I seen a woman, I felt someone who kind of felt what I was feeling in the trade. So I think more probably educating more women on getting into the energy sector would probably be my first suggestion. But I mean, I can sit here all day and list many.
Great. No, thank you very much for your feedback. I think that, we're still having these awkward discussions because it is something that we are facing and we are challenged in the sector. So I can certainly appreciate, Roberta, where you're coming from, being the only female on a construction site, building commercial wind farms here in Canada and the USA. I would typically be the only female as well. So I can definitely say that, I wish that the number would still be more elevated than it is. However, we are here to discuss this barrier. Over to you, Professor Hoyka.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. It's a really good question. I think I had three things. One is implicit bias, and implicit bias is where we look at someone and we don't assume that they might be an expert in that sector. And a lot of women report that to me. I've had that experience as well. And I see it all around where we look at someone and assume, okay, they must be the expert. They must know, I'm going to go to them, rather than looking at things like experience or considering that someone who doesn't look a certain way actually might be your best expert or your best person for the job. I think the other thing is networks, not having enough networks to show that actually, even though the numbers are quite low, there is actually a critical mass still. And having networks where we can, women and non-binary people, where we can find each other and share our experiences and also share opportunities with each other and support each other. So I think having networks is a really critical piece of participating equally in the sector. And I think the last thing is governance. And so on my side, I've sat in on policy discussions. The last time I sat in on a policy discussion before the pandemic, I watched a young woman with her hand up for probably 20 minutes. And the other questioners were very aggressive. And so there was just a lot of jumping in and interrupting and jumping in and interrupting. And there wasn't any management of the line of questions and who was getting to ask them. And I think afterwards I spoke with the organizers and said, there were some people who were waiting for 20 minutes to ask a question. And other people were just interrupting and jumping in. And actually it was a woman waiting who never got to ask her question, or she had to wait a really long time. And there are governance methods for being able to allow different voices and different styles to participate equally in some of these events and in some of these discussions. And I think there's a lot more governance aspects, but that's just one example that I can mention that I saw recently.
Those are fantastic answers, and I really appreciate you sharing that with the audience. I know when I started Wire, I had a lot of derogatory comments. I even had hate mail. I was told that I was segregating the industry, and my response was always, I'm bringing the industry together because we need champions. And, it's unfortunate to hear that this young woman was waiting for 20 minutes to be able to get her question answered. So I really appreciate it. And thanks again for your feedback. And Yasmin, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to what Roberta and Christina said. I think, so I introduced myself the way I normally do in a business setting with my boilerplate. But, the other part of me is that I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I have 2 small children, a 7-year-old girl and a 5-year-old girl. Both my kids are in before and after school care. My husband has a full-time job. And so I have this whole life that's part of my work. And I think when I look back early in my career, I wasn't able to see women in the industry who had a holistic life, who were mothers, who were wives, who were making dinner and dropping off and dentist appointments and swimming lessons. I couldn't see that as a young woman, and I didn't know how that would look. Like I've always wanted to be a mother and I have a family, but I've also had a really big part of myself that's an entrepreneur, and I wanted to be a leader, and I knew that was part of my career, but I couldn't picture how those two things could work, because I think we have this old culture across our society of saying like, better not mention that you're a mother, better not mention you have kids, better not mention you got to leave at 3 o'clock to pick up your kids. And so I think there's a lot of younger women that can't really picture what it's going to look like for them to have a career and have a family. And I think this is, for me, that was a really big barrier. And I still don't really know a lot of women in sort of leadership positions that demonstrate their family life. And I think that, we have our culture of organizations, it doesn't make it easy for women and mothers to have that whole life. I mean, I think we've all seen in COVID, when they're calling it the she session, women, disproportionate amount of women had to leave the workforce, even if they were the higher earners of their family, because, the emotional labor goes to them. And I think that's a reality. And how can we create cultures in our workforce that support and encourage and are inclusive for women, and don't say, oh, well, you can work for us, that you better not have a family, you better not want to go on vacation, you better not want to put your kids in soccer lessons. I don't think that's a reality. Work happens inside life and life happens inside work. And I think it's a huge shift, not just in our industry, but across our communities and culture, that really needs to be made.
Thank you very much for that powerful statement, Yasmin. So I'm going to continue on, and without any particular order, I'll ask one of the panelists to answer this. While it is important to raise awareness about the barriers to women in the sector, our audience is often very practical and wants to know specific ways they can take action on issues of inequality. What are some of the best practices you have seen or utilized for overcoming these barriers to women? So I'll open that up to the panelists. Yasmin, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Yes, I was going to jump in. But I think for me, and kind of what the point I was just making, I think for me, the real things that I can do on a day-to-day are normalizing having a holistic life. I know that I'm in a position of privilege in our organization as a leader. I know that I have the privilege of being able to do things that others might not feel comfortable doing. And so I certainly really try to normalize what it's like to be a mother and a wife during work. So I do, just little things like I will make sure that picking up my kids and dropping them off is in my calendar, and people know that I'm not available for those 2 half-an-hour periods in the day. I will post things on Slack during the middle of the day if it's a snow day and show photos of our kids. I really try to be honest and share my life in terms of that. Sometimes, when I'm struggling or I have to go make dinner or a kid's sick, like I really just try and share the realities of the logistics of a busy life, so that for 2 reasons. One, so that younger women in my organization can see that and don't think of it as a negative, and can see that and say that, okay, this is how it works. Okay, I get it. And then the second part is there's also other parents, of course, in our organization, and I want to normalize it for them. I don't want them to feel guilty or bad when they have this stuff going on. I want them to say, oh, well, Yasmin's off with her kid at the dentist in the middle of the day. That's okay for us to do that. And I don't want them to ever feel stressed about that. So certainly I think that's kind of a small thing that I try to do to break down those barriers and demonstrate what this sort of life as a woman in this industry is like.
Thank you so much. You know, it's interesting because for myself, I don't have children and I am a wife. However, I get different comments surrounding not having children. So it's, you know, it's interesting hearing from, you know, women that have children, women that don't have children, women that can't conceive and so forth. But I think that, you know, overall, children or no children, I think that women are still being marginalized in a lot of different ways because of their choice of having or not having. So I really, really appreciate that. Thank you
totally
so much.
agree. Yeah.
Professor Hoyka.
Yeah, I can talk about this. Yeah, I do some of what Yasmin talks about. I do a lot of unpacking hierarchies. I unpack, you know, what's happening, what's going on, explain how these different systems that my graduate students or students are going to walk into in the sector, or I unpack how even the university setting works, and give them a lot more transparent information as tools to participate. I also, one of the really big things for me was that when I started to experience the implicit bias, I actually started to realize, well, I have a lot of implicit bias and I need to address that. And so I really started looking for other experts outside of the mainstream. And I stopped assuming that, you know, a man was in charge or he would be the best person in the organization to speak to, and started realizing that there's a lot of, there are a lot of people who have a lot of resources who I was overlooking myself. And I think that once I started to really address that, everything really opened up. I'm a researcher and a policy wonk, so I always want the best ideas. I want the best solutions and the best ideas. And so I don't really look at it as gendered or anything else in that sense. It's just that I really want, when we're at a table or we're in a lab meeting or whatever it is, how can I get the best ideas out? How can I get everybody's thoughts out? And how do I create an environment or structure a classroom or structure a meeting so that we can get those? And that also actually happens to fit with addressing implicit bias and being inclusive, addressing not only gender barriers, but also barriers around accessibility, barriers around what Yasmin talked about, having a family, or, you know, we also have things like just being human, like having students also have lives. That's a lot of what I deal with, and other researchers. So being transparent about those things as well. So I think, and then the other thing again is pushing networks. And so in my position, when I'm dealing with colleagues, I invite them to Wiser. When I'm dealing with students, I push them towards women in renewable energy as a network. And I also just talk really honestly about the gender barriers and other types of barriers that are faced. And we have open discussions about it in my lab setting. So those are some of the practices that I've used. And one thing that I've also done to address implicit bias is I put images and bios that everybody in my lab does. They write their own bios, and that's gone on my website. And I've actually noticed that because the people in my lab are pretty diverse, I get a lot of interest based on people feeling like they'll be able to do some of their best work by coming to my lab and working with me. And so I advertise my lab and research environment as a place where people can bring the best solutions. So those are some of the things that I do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Those are really powerful words, Professor Hoika. Roberta, what are your thoughts?
Well, what I do, some of the practices that I do. So when I'm doing career skills with our clients, so I share basically my experience with them. It helps them, it helps pave the way and make it a little bit more easier for women to make that transition into the trades and, the energy sectors. So that really, I talk about my personal experiences, for the last 15 years, I'm a mother as well. So, going through school, just navigating the whole apprenticeship process. I talk about that a lot with my clients. And basically, how I navigated through it, and facing the stereotypes and, all of the derogatory comments that I faced throughout my career. My car was keyed, like different things that happened to me. I talk about those experiences, and it helps the women, going through our programs and, any public speaking engagements I've ever done. I share those experiences. So it'll bring more awareness, for women, not, for everyone in general, Indigenous people, women, especially, going through this process. It wasn't always easy. There were many times that I wanted to give up, but, I highlight, I talk about, it's not all, a bed of roses. It's, so we, just bringing more awareness to, what women face, as the primary caregivers sometimes, for their families. For myself, my husband, he works on the pipeline, so he's away from home all the time. During my whole apprenticeship, he would be on night shift, and I'd have little ones running around. So I basically, if I can navigate through that, as a mother, and I've had a very successful career thus far. And, these are the things that I talk about and share, which, helps pave the way and make it a little bit easier for women getting into the industry.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Roberta. I'm so sorry. I know that probably most of us on the panel have shared, navigating obstacles and, trying to give up as well. So, a big applause to you and, and your champions that are behind you to continue your journey. So thanks for sharing again. So right now, the renewable sector is currently not only dominated by men, but it is also dominated by white men in particular. Can you comment on the additional barriers women of color face when entering this sector? Roberta, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Absolutely. There's been, I always tell my clients, as a woman, going into a man's world, you do have to, kind of work twice as hard, just to prove yourself and, to show that, you belong there as well, just as much as they do. And as an Indigenous woman, going into the industry, it's the navigation is a lot tougher. You have a lot more to prove only because of the stereotypes, discrimination, things like that. So it's really, really, it was a tough go. I mean, it's getting better. There's more awareness, especially with Truth and Reconciliation, the 92 calls to action. So I feel, and I'm hoping it's getting better. I see more because I deal with a lot of employers and industry. There's more awareness, they're educating themselves on these things. So I've had tons of barriers when, in the industry as a whole. And it's all really like I educate my clients on this, how you rise above it and how you deal with it. And, the way you present yourself, as a woman. I've worked with many, many women in the trades, and I could probably, I talk about first impressions with my clients, and, when I look at a woman, my first impression, I can tell if she's going to make it on the site we're at, or, whatever it is we're doing. I could just, it's just a first impression that I do. So, represent, how you present yourself, are you there to work? Are you there? Just, there's a variety of things that, I talk about. So how to navigate through these barriers as a woman. I think just, the way you carry yourself, the way you talk to people, there's many, many ways I've carried myself through all of these barriers, and I've made it thus far through the industry, and I have a lot to share. I could sit here and talk about it all day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I typically use, I live downtown Toronto. So in Toronto, we have over 117 spoken languages, and yet our industry is dominated by white men. I'm typically the only female around the boardroom table, whether it's on construction site, whether it's at the executive level or management. So, these are barriers that we are still continuing to face, and I think that it is important that we continue to vocalize and, to your point, raise awareness and educate and outreach. So thank you for that. Yasmin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a big question when I read this. I do identify as a person of color, a woman of color. My dad's side of the family is from India and East Africa. My mother's side is from England. And I think for me, my experience here, so I work in equity and really advocating for and delivering solutions to address gaps in our system, gaps in not just renewables, but climate change, housing, energy. And I think the challenge for me is that I am identifying, there's 30% of our country are immigrants and people of color who have specific experiences, and, the systems are not set up, have never been set up to support them. And a lot of my work is walking into traditionally white spaces and sharing this and convincing people and talking about this work. And I think personally for me, it's work and it's my career, and not everybody moves forward, and we have clients or people that we work with in the industry that choose not to engage with us. Of course, that's work is work. But I think the challenge as a person of color is that I am speaking about this from a place of life experience. I'm not selling iPhones and people are just saying, no, I don't want an iPhone. I'm selling this as my personal experience. And I think and Christina, you kind of mentioned some personal bias and not considering women as the expert. And I find it hard. I find it very hard to work in equity and as a person of color, and to feel like people don't value my personal experience. It feels like it feels like people don't believe me. And I find it very hard, and my team knows this. My team knows I can get very passionate, and it's emotional work. It's emotional work working in equity as a person of color. And I think it's really hard, and you have to sort of have grit, and some of those things that Roberta was saying, writing them down. It's it is hard work, and it's that's kind of what I would say about that. I certainly don't have the experience of a Black person or of an Indigenous person. So, I would love to get somebody else's sense on that. But that's my own experience as a woman of color working in this industry for sure.
Thank you so much. I think that diversity and inclusion, it's a journey. It's something that we will have to continue to progress and really work hard together to solidify that messaging. And, I wish that the wires of the world did not have to exist, because then our job wouldn't be done. But thank you so much for sharing that. Professor Hoyka, I'd love to hear from you.
I think I'll pass on this question, but answer the next one. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So then this, Professor Hoyka, this will go to you. Are there additional best practices, are there additional best practices companies that can employ to welcome more women of color into the workforce in particular?
Yes, I have lots of ideas about this. I think following on what Yasmin mentioned about people not believing, I think there's quite a few. So one thing I think is, just listening to people of color or people who have a different experience around being in an equity seeking group, whether it's accessibility or something like that, and not learning to not judge and just listen and trying to understand. I think that's a really good practice. So I think, addressing your own implicit bias. But I think best practices come from governance, come from all kinds of things. So who is on your board of your organization? Who is running your organization and making decisions? Are you valuing some experiences over others that are actually equally useful in terms of merit or qualifications for the position? What are you doing to make it a welcoming space for people? Is it going to be somewhere where someone feels like they're just, fighting against something, or is it going to be a space where it feels welcome? And I think that's where you really need to do the work around the implicit bias around governance. And I think also, what are your networks? So who are you advertising to? Who are you reaching out to when you're trying to reduce these barriers? And I think another thing is to change your perception around why this is important. And again, because I'm concerned about a just energy transition, and I'm concerned around the broader social benefits and environmental benefits of renewable energy. I really think we're in a very complex world right now when we're trying to find climate solutions, and we're also trying to be just. And so I think if you turn your perspective, for some people, it actually will benefit your organization. And there's lots of research to show this, that the more inclusive you are, that the more that you're removing these barriers, your performance is better, but also I think you'll just have an environment where people really want to participate and be part of it. And I think you'll get a lot better outcomes. But that's also shown in the data. And I think in just one more thing I want to mention, which is in terms of me, because I'm a white woman, and what I do in my own personal practice is I spend time with women of color. So if a woman of color reaches out to me and needs a quick mentoring session on something or has some kind of an issue, I prioritize that. Even if I only have like 30 minutes, we set up a call and we talk. And I try to work with them to navigate and to make sure that they go at something from a position of power and make sure that they're setting themselves up to make some of the right career moves and that type of a thing. And so that's mainly my personal practice in terms of supporting women of color.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Roberta, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I see with industry, they're trying. So I was actually just having a conversation with my coworker about this yesterday. When industry partners make a job posting and they put in their job posting journey woman or journeyman, I personally like that, because I don't like being called a journey woman. I like the term journeyman. It just, it sounds correct to me. But when companies do make a job posting and putting journey woman, it feels really inviting. So it's almost saying, they welcome women to come and, work for their company. They're open to it. And it just makes it easier. It's like, oh, this company, is all about hiring women, but I've seen different industry partners, straight up, say, we don't like hiring women, because there's always childcare issues, or they can't start at 7 o'clock because the daycare doesn't open till 7:30, things like that. So I do work with, a lot of really great industry partners that, accommodate the women and say, how about I give you a later start time? How about, instead of starting at 7, you start at 7:30. And then it helps the women, those mothers, take the kids to daycare because, dad might start at, 6 a.m. or, dad's not in the picture, right? So there's different things, that companies, I have seen some really great industry partners, welcome. From an Indigenous standpoint, there's different things that employers are doing there. Because we provide an Indigenous workforce, and we train in an Indigenous people. They come to us to educate them on, how to work with, First Nations communities, proper protocols, things like that. So it's really nice. We welcome that when our industry partners, ask us that. So I can see that they're trying, they're, especially for women, I'm always, promoting our women. In our program, we have about 25% of women that we train throughout our program. So on an average, we train about 265 Indigenous people here in Edmonton and Calgary, and 25% of those are women. So, we're very, very proud of that. We recently just ran a program, a tiny home program in the John Doerr community, and I believe there was 12 women that completed, they built a house and completed it to lock and key stage. So that was very empowering for all of them, the sense of accomplishment, and they had a lot of barriers to navigate through too. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I certainly can appreciate, from a job posting as well, I see that it's really typically triggered towards men. And I think that this becomes an HR issue. It's the way that we actually provide a job description. There is a way to be neutral about it as well, not for men, not for women. It can be for all. I know that most women have a tendency of, if we're applying for a job, checking all the boxes. Well, men don't, so why should we? So I always encourage women and anyone, don't check all the boxes on a job description. For instance, every single job that I've held, I've had to be a professional engineer. I am not an engineer at all. And yet every single position that I have held, I had to have PN. So again, I don't check boxes, and I encourage any of you not to check boxes. So thank you for that, Roberta. Yasmin, off to you.
Thank you. Yes, such great points, Roberta. And as you were speaking, I wanted to say also that I think it's important that we consider men in this conversation too. I think we also need to encourage and normalize men dropping kids off at daycare and men making dinner. And it shouldn't be, and it isn't always on us. But I think there's a side of the coin that men also don't feel comfortable to normalize that work at work. Certainly I think in my own relationship with my husband works in the engineering field, and the culture at his work is not supportive to him taking paternity leave, taking time for the kids. Certainly I saw that in COVID. It was just not an option for him to change his work schedule. So I had to do it. And, it's really hard. So I think normalizing and encouraging the men in our industry to also be open with the realities of having families is an important piece. The only other thing I'd add to all of those wonderful comments is for us, so at Cambo, 77% of our workforce are people of color and 60% are women. And that is our competitive advantage. By far, that is our competitive advantage. We have people on our team who have the tacit insights and understanding of how the people we work with live in their world. And it's in a way that others in our industry just don't. And so I certainly encourage, I think that's a piece that maybe organizations, maybe they do consider, but for us, of course it's the right thing to do, but there's real economic benefits to having a diverse workforce. So that's the only other comment I'd add.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that if you're an organization and you don't have women sitting at the top, then you're late to the party. And I really encourage all companies and organizations to ensure that women have a seat at the table. So thank you for that. I'm going to encourage the audience at this time to enter your Q&As, and I'm going to start with the first question. And thank you, Michael Schultz, for this question. In the last 15 years, I have not seen an increase in the number of women in the electrical trade, of which I am an instructor. Why is this? Roberta, perhaps you'd like to answer this.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of, other women. With our program, he's somewhat right. There's not a very large interest from women to get into the electrical industry, but in my past 15 years in the industry, I've worked with some really great amazing women throughout training, on different job sites. I've managed a few job sites with some big industry partners, and when I was looking for help or looking for apprentices, I always brought a woman. So it's hard to say. I mean, it's when I was in high school, math was not my strong suit, I'll tell you that. Right out of high school, I did take finance at NAIT, and it was definitely not what I wanted to do. I just wanted to appease my parents because they said if I continued to go to school, they would furnish my apartment. So I'm like, Kate, whatever program I got into, I got in. But never was a strong, like math was just, I was horrible at it. So I think academically, I wanted a challenge when I made my career move, when I became an electrician. I just wanted a challenge. And so the academics in electrical is tough. It's quite tough. So I could see that maybe being a barrier to, the interest in the trade. But I really can't speak on why it's happening. I mean, I wish and I hope that more and more women would go, become electricians. I know for myself in industry, electricians are a very hot commodity right now. We don't have an electrician that is not working right now. So we have industry partners that are, dying for us to run an electrical program because they need electricians. But we unfortunately, we didn't run an electrical program this year. We don't have one due to start until 2022. So, I hope, I don't know, I can't really answer that. Sorry.
No, that was great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yasmin or Professor Hooka, would you like to also answer this question?
I don't have any other insights. I think Roberta answered it super well.
Great. Okay. Sarah asks, how can initiatives to support women in the renewable energy work to be intersectional and properly include and address all women's diverse needs? Professor Hooka, please.
This is a really tough question. I was looking at that and was like, how would I answer that? I think one thing is to know, this is what I tell my students when I teach, if we had all the answers for how to make things you know, how to deal with climate change, how to implement renewable energy, all of that, we would have done it. And you know, some of it's power dynamics, but we don't know all the answers. And so this is not about a top down, like, we know how to do this. This is about everybody rolling along with their experiences and learning from them and always trying to do our best. So I think, for example, I think that there are ways. Governance is a really, really big one. And what I mean by governance is, how do you run a meeting? Who gets to speak? What's our agreement when we're in a meeting together? But also, what assumptions are we making about people? And sometimes when you make an assumption about somebody, you're going to shut them down right away because you've just assumed that they're straight, or you've just assumed that they have a certain background. You've assumed they have a certain amount of finances, because socioeconomic background also is another thing. So, and the other thing too is that sometimes these needs are going in different directions. So what one person might need for accessibility might be what someone else won't work for someone else. So I think overall, being flexible, really listening, and knowing that this is like a this is like a process over time, and you're trying to like listen to people and talk to them and incorporate and do the best that you can, and that things may not always work out perfectly, but I also think so, and I think really listening to people and believing in them and knowing that people know what's best for them, but the governance to me and the networks are really, really key.
Absolutely. I think it comes from the top down, and definitely for governance. I mean, that is a huge issue that we need to continue being discussed. So thank you for that. Yasmin, did you have any comments for this question?
No, I think I was just going to add to what Christina said, and I sort of say the same thing in our world. If this was easy, it would have been done, and hard work is hard. And I think you just have to try. You just have to try some stuff. Like, I think all of the ideas that have come today, and I'm sure lots of audience members have lots of ideas. I think it's just keeping the conversation moving, talking to people, trying things in your business, and not looking for the silver bullet. I think that's the other thing. There's not going to be one solution. We just have to keep pushing forward.
Great, thank you. Roberta, anything to add?
I think that we covered most of it, but I know for our organization, we were talking about having like an advisory committee just for the women, and we were talking about how we would provide childcare, so it gives the parents with the women with kids to come, have an hour of a roundtable discussion on the barriers they face, how can we overcome them, things like that. So that was kind of where we're at with that. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
That's great. Thank you very much. So another question from Christine Campbell: are we creating enough, if any, mentorship programs for women in the renewable energy world? I can definitely start that one, since WIRE does a lot of mentorship and mentoring. So definitely get yourself involved in organizations that do mentorship, such as WIRE. WIRE partners with many different non-for-profits, including Professor Hoyka's organization, including Solar Alberta. So I encourage you to visit our website as well and look under our partners, and you can definitely click on the different logos, and you can definitely look at the different organizations that provide those mentorships. So I don't know, Christina, Yasmin, or Roberta, you want to add any further comments to that?
I think I'll just step in for a bit. I think we definitely do need more mentorship programs, I think it's, not only in the renewable energy world, but straight across the board. It just having that mentor, with whatever career that you're in, for men and women is good, but I think there needs to be more awareness, definitely. So I think I don't think we're creating enough.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to mention as well, when I first started as a professor in 2013, I would go to events and I was the only woman in the room for energy stuff. And that's going to be the case now for women of color, for non-binary people, for Indigenous, people, and I'm thinking, I only know about academia really. So there was a really big pressure for mentorship. And I think there's sometimes too much demand for the number of people and the amount of time that they have. So that's why with Wiser, we really started on a networking model and on sort of knowing each other and collaborating towards the goals that we needed to move our careers forward. So how do we get a grant? How do I get that next job? And so now our network is probably like 4 years further along. People who were in PhDs are now professors. We've actually populated a whole bunch of the professor jobs in Canada and Canada Research Chair jobs in Canada. And so we've all moved forward in the institution. So I really want to promote that when you're in a situation where there's a lot of scarcity, sometimes the network model is a really good one. The other one is, I always say to my students, and I always say to people who feel like maybe they're on the outside, start your own club. Just start your own club, whatever it is. If you're going to go to a conference, set up your own panel and you're going to find your people. Just find your people and do that, even if, and I also push everybody towards WIRE. So those are just a few thoughts in terms of sometimes resources are just not there for mentoring, or quite limited in some cases.
Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to add further comments? Okay, thank you so much. Megda Chandra has a very good question. How do we involve men to encourage more women to be a part of boards and higher positions?
I can, or to start the comment on this. It's right before this webinar, I actually had a call from somebody who was asking me to join like a coaching, like almost like a CEO forum, but wasn't a CEO forum. And sounded great. It sounded awesome, and something that I'm not involved in, and certainly I would have value being part of. And he kind of said that he was looking for diversity. It's a group of white men, and so he wants some diversity, which is great, and I'm supportive of that. But then the idea of me stepping into that space, it feels a little like I have hesitations, and I haven't quite processed what my hesitations are, but I appreciate the idea of it or the effort, but I don't like, for me to walk into a space and be vulnerable and share sort of my challenges as a leader and what I need to do. And I'm not sure that a group of white men is the space for me. So that's not really a great answer, but I think it's complicated. It's complicated because when that is a table that I certainly want to have a seat at. Very successful men probably have lots of relationships and networking and all those things. The doors would open, but there it is in front of me, and I'm feeling a little ooh. So I don't know. It's complicated. How do we encourage men? Have these conversations with them, I guess, one way.
Great, thank you. Anyone else would like to comment?
Yeah, I'll pipe in here. I know for myself, because my husband, he works in the, kind of the energy sector, I guess. He's wears many hats. So for us, he was kind of with me the whole way, where when I'd come home and I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this work? But he was always very encouraging. So if we had more men who were encouraging their spouses, their daughters, their their co-workers, and giving that, educating them on the types of things that we go through on the daily as women in this industry. I think it would pave the way and make it a little bit more easier for women if we just had more men like that and supporting. I know for personal experience, all the industry partners we deal with, and they seem to be very welcoming. So I haven't had a time where they're very supportive and encouraging, to what we do, to what I do. And for Yasmin, I think that's a great opportunity. You would just walk in and you would own it. That's how you would that's how you would navigate that, like, and that would be amazing. It would be it would be very empowering too.
Yeah, I think, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that, it's very important to acknowledge that there are champions that are male in our industry. I can speak for myself where I've had champions take me to that next level. Now, mentorship and sponsorship to me are have two different definitions. So throughout, I have had mentors, but I've also had sponsors. A mentor is there to really provide that education, to navigate you through difficult times, whereas a sponsor really takes you to that next level. And I really applaud the champions in my life that really came and really pushed me and empowered me. So I think that although we're still having to have these conversations, there are men out there that will support and empower and inspire us. So thank you for that. Another question came in from Jana Westheis. She's curious what Roberta or others specifically do in terms of first impressions, how they carry themselves to get to leadership roles. I work with all white men, and I find I'm constantly dealing with implicit bias and steer to more women-dominated roles like communications, not engineering or analytics. I'm not a leader and upper management, but don't know how to overcome this to get where I would like to be in the company. Would anyone like to take this on?
Well, maybe I'll start. So for me, I'd like to say I was a natural born leader, but I wasn't. I was, I was quite shy. And when I got into the trades, I tell you, I never, you have to kind of grow a thicker skin because of it's a male dominated world. And I was, F-bombs here and F-bombs there. So it was quite the whole change for me. So as the years went on, you just become more confident. I think confidence is key. The way you present yourself, the way you talk, that's definitely my suggestion. And then you work with all white men, and the stuff that you have to deal with. I think it's very empowering to walk into, and I've done this, many times. I've been a keynote speaker a few times. I think the largest group I had was over 800 people, and probably very male dominated. So I have no problem walking into that room and owning it. And and it's confidence. It's I'm confident in what I do, and it sounds like you say you're not a leader, but you are. Everyone has it in them. And so I think once you gain that confidence and build up that self-esteem within yourself, and you are a natural born leader, we all have it in us, believe me, because if you met me 25 years ago, you'd be like, who is this woman? So I hope that helps you, Jenna.
Thank you for that, Roberta. Yasmin, sorry, go ahead.
I would just add to that. I think I totally agree with what Roberta says. You are a leader, and I think you do have it in you. One thing I always say is that don't wait for somebody to elevate you. Don't wait for somebody to hand you the responsibility. Take it. take it, find a thing, find a project, find a gap, find an opportunity, and just do it. And, you know, maybe you might have to beg for forgiveness, but I bet people will kind of stand up and say, oh, okay, she can do this. Nobody's going to hand it to you. I think that's the thing. You have to take it yourself. So that's my advice across if I'm talking to somebody about a career, you got to take it. And call me if you need advice. That's the other thing. If you want to chat, give me a call.
If I can add one more thing, everything that Roberta and Yasmin have said is really good, wonderful. I would add, it looks like you want to move into another area, and you already are a leader, but you want to move into being a leader in a different area. And I think I've just kind of learned how to, and I've worked on this with my students and stuff, have a few headlines. Your headlines are, I'm working in this right now. These are all the things that I've accomplished. And my goal is to move into engineering and analytics, and make that your headline with everybody you talk to in that organization, because you'll find your allies that way in terms of talking about your goals. And just framing it like this is the natural next step of my career progression. And that comes with the confidence and asking for forgiveness and just owning it. That like, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm going to do. And just speaking that out loud to everybody around you, so that they know as well that that's the direction that you're going in.
Great, thank you very much. Michael Schultz has, this will be our final questions for the audience, but for the panelists. From my experiences, mentorship and developing relationship is a greater benefit than monetary funding when it comes to enticing women into the trades. Where does mentorship come for people that are foreign to the trade world? Anyone would like to take this on? Okay.
I think one thing that, Michael, your question is making me think of, so the work that I do is very specific, and there's not a lot of folks, men or women, in the industry who have sort of an understanding of the little niche of the corner that I work in. But recently I did get connected to a mentor, and she's a woman, and she doesn't specifically work in our area, but she has a general understanding of the work that I do and the struggles that I face or the challenges I may face. And that has been a game changer for me, that she understands the industry, but she might not understand my specific job or my specific, like the technical pieces that I do, but she understands sort of the overall industry. And so I think maybe there's a space for mentors who are not specifically in trades, but maybe on a satellite space, who could help support. You know, it doesn't have to be a senior electrician mentoring a junior electrician. It can be other folks for sure. And often they have better, I think people outside of the industry are able to see things that we are not, because we're so in it. So I think there is benefit to that.
Great, thank you so much. With that, we are at the top of the hour. So I want to thank every single person that attended today. Thank you so much to Solar Alberta and to our sponsor Butterwick. I cannot thank you enough, Professor Hoyka, Yasmin, and Roberta. You are inspiring, empowering, and leaders. And, you know, thank you for your valuable time. Please stay connected. And that goes for every single person on this call. We look forward to hearing with you and working with you. So thank you very much for your leadership and just being wonderful advocates in the gender and diversity and inclusion segment. So with that, we will end. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.